Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Student Success Center, welcome. Hope you're having a great day and a great week. We are so honored and so grateful for Mark Lopez being here today to teach us about fundamentals and being a successful writer in college. So Lord, we just thank you for the time with Mark. We ask you, Father, to bless him. We ask you to bless our students. We ask you to bless the people who are watching this in the future and in the present, Lord. Thank you and thank you. Amen. All right.
Cool.
You're on. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Lopez. I get to teach the English 1301 and 1302 classes here at King's University. I'm also, I work in IT or AT. I'm the Associate Director of Academic Technology. So I'm happy to help answer anything about English or IT or AT or anything in between. But really, I'm here to kind of help you learn how to be a perfect writer in 30 minutes. That is a joke. That is not going to happen. So I just want to preface this entire session with saying that you will not become a perfect writer by the end of the session. But I'm hoping that I could give you some tools to become a more reflective writer. One thing that I tell my students in English 1301 is that I am not there in a semester's class to make them a perfect writer by the end of the semester itself. I can't do that in a semester. That cannot be done in an entire degree program and cannot be done within an entire master program. I know because I got a master's in English. It's not gonna make you a perfect writer. What I can help the most is be a more prepared and reflective writer as you enter in the college academic setting. And as you enter in, just trying to help communicate and be part of something. I love writing, I really do. I got a master's in English with creative writing. So I specifically got my master's and did a thesis on a Spawn novel. I got my undergrad degree in mass communication. So I worked at a news station before doing that. I was a news producer, so I would write the scripts for the news station. Basically, everything about my life has led to an love and affinity for writing. I really love writing. It's what I do. It's what I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm not sure. I'll have to find out. But I really love getting to write. But I also know that not everyone loves writing, and that is 100% okay. So if you do not love writing, that is amazing. If you hate writing, that is incredible. If you love writing, that is also incredible. But if you hate it and you're just nervous and you're scared about writing in a collegiate academic setting, that is 100%, a million percent okay. For those that are on Zoom, do you like academic writing? Anyone want to take an answer at that? You could be honest. I'm not going to tell your professors.
I don't know yet.
Teresa, I don't know. Yeah, that's a really tough question. Yeah. What about you, Robin? Do you like academic writing?
I don't mind it. The bibliography part of it is the part I don't like, but other than that, I don't mind it.
Yeah. Hey, well, that's good. That's good. I saw a great comment from Alicia. She says, academic writing scares me. It is scary. Yes, that is a great thing. It scares me too. Don't worry. I'm extremely terrified of it. Anyone else feel the same way, same sentiment? Are they afraid of academic writing? Do we even know what it is? Teresa, yeah, like, I don't know. Do we even know what academic writing is? It's such a vague thing, such a vague concept. How to write academically, what does that even mean? Let's see, we got another comment there. What do we got? What do we got? Hi, Kathy. Yeah, but academic writing is scary. It is a tough thing. And I have terrible news to break to you. It is supposed to be hard. It is a hard thing to master. It is a hard thing to accomplish. It is not a thing that you're going to get a lot of easy answers to kind of on a very quick daily basis. I always start with a story in my English 1301 class. I'm not a young man anymore. I was once a young graduate student in my English program. I thought I was super cool. I was like 22. It was my first semester in my English grad program. I was like, I'm the cool kid on campus. This is what I do. And I get thrown into a class called rhetoric or theory on rhetoric. Sorry, so theory on rhetorical writing. So I'm presenting, I do my essay for my class. We have like a just essay like in general, like for your first assignment. So I write a like 8-page long essay on the theory of writing. 8 pages, like huge. It is formatted perfectly. It is incredibly done well. All the periods are in place, all the commas are in place, all the footnotes are cited. I'm super proud about my bibliography section. Everything looks great. I turned it in and I get feedback the next week from my professor. And he says, there's only one good sentence in this entire paper. In my entire 8 pages, I wrote like 4,000 words, and he's like, there's only one good sentence in here. So I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, my paper looks perfect. There are like footnotes, everything is spaced out. I did the 5-paragraph function all throughout the paper. And he says, there's only one sentence that you actually meant to say something original. And you actually tried to say something. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks that academic writing has often been scary to us because we are trying to fit into a format and we're trying to fit into an idea of what it should be that we're so afraid of actually saying something original sometimes. And my goal at the end of this 30 minutes is to try to help us get back to saying something original and being excited to do it and being excited to step into what we're doing here in education. Education is beautiful. It is amazing. It is complicated. It is uneasy. It is hard. It is kind of weird. But education provides you a great opportunity to say something, to contribute to a conversation that is happening before you get to school, and that will continue happening after you leave school. You get to engage in something and engage in a conversation with it. So I got some 5 points here over what is academic writing and what to do and what not to do, and kind of help prepare you as you kind of go along in the way. So it is scary. It's a very scary creation, but here are some things to kind of help you along the way. One, we always say this word, and we always say these 2 words together, which are, do you know? I'm going to share a whiteboard. Thank you. There we go. First point, do you know if you're writing formal or informal? So formal versus informal. And I want to tell you the truth right now. That is, neither one is the enemy. In fact, you often have to use them together to get to the essay that you need to create. Academic writing typically is a little bit more formal. We use a lot of formal language. We like the thus and the then, and we sound like Shakespeare. We want to sound really professional and cool. And you don't try to put yourself too much in it. Typically in academic writing, you don't use like I or me or you. You go strictly to the third person, like using he or they or any kind of proper terms. You don't try to use a lot of slang. You don't try to use a lot of different just funny verbs, and you don't try to use like kind of very short sentences. You try to make them a little bit longer overall. Essentially, it's kind of asking you in the worst possible way, try to sound smart and try to think that you're sounding smart. And we get so concerned about the formal half that we don't realize that oftentimes we also need the informal half to make sure that we're trying to figure out what we're trying to say. So formal versus informal writing. Informal is like saying it's raining cats and dogs outside. And formal writing is like saying it is raining quite heavily outside. You kind of like shift the language around a little bit. But it could get a little bit tricky because we think that we got to write formal literally all the time. And that is not the case. I think oftentimes academic writing, we are so afraid of just approaching it by giving too much of ourselves into it and being a little, too vulnerable for our own feeling of success, for our own feeling of personality. And that's where I get really sad about what I try to do with my students. Essentially what I do in my class is I make them start in a very vulnerable place, in a very personal place when we first start doing our essays. Our first essay is literally about themselves. It's like autobiographical. Our second essay is about where they learned how to read and write, their first interaction with school, very personal details about home and their experience in education. And then from there, we start going into what theories do we have on education, or what do we want to fix? And then from there, we go into the research paper. The reason why I do that is because we have to start at a very personable place to make something that is actually worth saying in a college setting, I think. We want to say something, we want to contribute to conversation. So it is okay to start at a personal place. It is okay to start informal and then work your way to formal. I think if we start and we go strictly into formal, we could go in one direction too far. If we go too informal, you will get a bad grade on your essay in the end. You don't want to do that, but it is okay to use both for what you're doing. How do you know if you are supposed to be writing formal or informal for a college essay? That's a scary part. So one thing I like to tell my students, and one thing that we typically go over, is reading what is being asked of you for your essay, knowing the exact prompts, knowing what the professor is asking for. Are they asking for an analysis? Are they asking for an argument? Are they asking for a specific look at a different objective? Are they looking for a specific thing? That's going to help you identify formal versus informal, how you're writing it, how you want to go one direction or the other. And then when you start kind of preparing for your essay, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself room to really grow and you're not setting yourself up for a loss. And what do I mean by that? When you could set yourself up for a loss in writing. What if you're already setting yourself up to fail before you even begin writing your first draft? It could happen. So one thing that I like to make sure I always go over is, am I looking over a topic or a question? Is my essay topic focused or question focused? One thing that I love that first year freshmen tend to do is that they will want to answer the world's biggest topic in a 3-page paper on a 2-week deadline, typically, or on about a week deadline. They will want to try to answer the world's biggest topic, and it is so vague and opaque and is large that you're really setting yourself up for a loss already. One practice that I actually just did in my class was and it was kind of mean, it's kind of cruel. I put like a giant timer on the TVs in my class for my students. I told them, write to me about education. Just super vague, a very vague topic. Not even like, do you like education or do you hate education? Just like, tell me about education. And I put a timer and I put a time crunch on them. And I had them write in that 15 minutes about education. And it honestly didn't sound bad. It sounded like what you would think every other single essay in the world would sound like. It didn't sound much of anything. It just sounded like you were kind of regurgitating information, that they were just kind of sharing information that they've heard all their life, because they reverted back to what they knew, which was not being really personable, not being very passionate about what they actually wanted to write in that essay. So it didn't sound bad by any means. It didn't sound unprepared. It sounded like as if I typed it into a Google search bar and I was reading a Wikipedia paragraph. And that is not what we want in an academic setting. We don't want a regurgitation of Wikipedia. we don't want an exact copy word for word of what you'll find in Google. We want something original. We want something that is going to be powerful. But I put them up for a loss because when I put a timer, I gave them a strict set of time. That was kind of tough. But then I also gave them a super vague topic. I didn't give them a question to actually look forward to. When you do topic versus question focus, and hopefully if you go over to question focus, when you're starting to create your research papers, you're then narrowing down what you're trying to look for and what you're trying to answer. Topic focus, huge, broad. You can't use it sometimes. It is going to lead you down a path every now and then. If you turn your research paper into a question or your paper into a question, then you get a sense of destination, a sense of answers, a sense of different viewpoints to look at, and you start to narrow down what you're writing. Getting a question is harder. Finding a topic, a little easy. Getting to that question you're trying to answer, that is actually where the challenge lies, because that's where you're trying to figure out, what am I actually trying to say? What do I want to say? What am I trying to answer? What am I trying to speak to? The question focus will help you narrow down that essay and help you avoid a couple different things and help you know what you're responding to essentially. After that, my next best tip, and this is for everyone, especially me, because I'm really bad at this, is, are you creating an outline for your essay? So when I was in my grad program, when you create a thesis, you will often have to create a piece of work that is about 90 pages long in itself. For those that are like super fan of word count, 90 pages is roughly around 45,000 words or so, maybe about 45 to about 50,000. The first time that I was trying to write my thesis, I turned in a draft and my thesis chair was like, you are a guy that needs an outline. And that is okay. He said, you are a guy that should probably make an outline that works for you. And I was like, I hate outlines. They're so boring. They're the worst thing to do. I was like, I hate creating a stupid series of like numbers and like, I want to talk about this in this paragraph and this in this paragraph. And if we were to ask, and if I were to ask anyone in the Zoom call to make an outline right now, they would automatically think of like your typical 5-paragraph essay outline, the intro, body, conclusion. It's kind of like ingrained in our heads at this point. We would think of that outline pretty easily. And then he was like, no, like you don't have to create that number or whatever system that you hate. Create an outline that you actually like, that you actually kind of helps you with it. If I were to show you my outline for this entire workshop, it is super informal. It is like incredibly informal. It is like my thoughts kind of scattered across the page. And then I kind of work down to like what I actually want to talk to in my points. I use just like improper informal language. I said, I want to do this, or this will be kind of cool. And I wrote it down literally like how you would as if I was like a regular millennial typing in a text message. But best of news is that typically no one is actually going to see that outline. It's only just for you. And it's only the way that you think and how you process. If you're a person that goes by the numbers, that's incredible. If you say like, I need numbers, I need letters, I need points, I need to see it correctly in the way that it should be, that is amazing, that is awesome. If you're someone that's like, you know, my outline is actually better if I just kind of scroll down and write down my thoughts in a successive order. And then from there, I can kind of break down how I want to build my essay. That's also incredible. That is awesome. I think one thing that we get so afraid of is that we think that we got to sound like everyone else and we got to write like everyone else. And we are individuals, and that is a beautiful part about what you're doing here. You're a specific individual with a specific way of writing and a specific way of communicating. You got to really embrace that. You got to celebrate that. You can't really shy away from it. You got to really kind of run towards it. And the best way to do that is even in how you create your outline. So creating an outline is great for a number of reasons. One, you could do your standard 1, 2, 3, and then A, B. Not the B, I promise. A, B, and then A, B, or if you want to just write down questions and question that you want to answer, question, and just kind of work your way down that way. One thing about creating an outline that I would love to recommend to everyone, and this is kind of good for just kind of overall essay writing in general. If you do not have an answer before you even begin writing your essay, that is okay too. I think oftentimes we think that going into college and creating an incredible academic essay means that you got to have all the answers already figured out before you even begin. That is not the point of education. What I like to see from my students is if they could ask the proper questions. I don't care about the answer. The answer that may come, it may not come, that is okay. Can they actually ask the proper questions and kind of figure it out from there? Can they kind of start in a place that they're not sure, find research, put in voices, and then even if they don't find an answer, that's okay. Because honestly, a lot of the topics that you guys are already looking at in your essays have been researched by scholars for centuries, for people by decades. They have written multiple books, they have written multiple things. And oftentimes at the end of every book or at the end of every chapter is just a simple, but it could be determined. And it could be a different answer later. And that's okay. And they did all this work to figure out a situation where there may not be an answer. We're not expecting you to always find an answer in a 4-page essay. And that's totally okay. What we want is for you to engage. So if you're creating an outline and you're like, man, I'm creating an outline, but I really don't have an answer to this outline or to this essay that I'm doing, that's 100% okay. It's important just to create those steps and create that intro, create that body, ask the question. If you have the question already in mind and you're like, I actually don't know the answer, that's perfect. That's exactly where we want you. We want to know that you have the question first, that you know what you're trying to say. You may not know what that exact destination is at the very end of it. We oftentimes don't, just in life. I mean, that's very philosophical. We don't know like the ending to our life in general. I'm not going to ask for an ending to your entire essay off the bat. I want to just see if you could get that structure across, that question across in itself. So create an outline. If you don't have an answer, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of not knowing the end. That's totally okay. After you create the outline, I want you to do my favorite thing, if your professor's not asking for this, which is create a draft. And I want you to specifically create a terrible draft if you're not able to turn it in. If you're not going to turn it in, if you're not going to turn in that paper, if it's the first draft and the professor says, hey man, just gonna have fun, go for it. Create a terrible draft. That is the best thing that you could possibly do. What I mean by that is that don't think that your first draft is going to be the perfect draft. It never is, I promise. Your first draft is never the perfect draft. Your first draft of anything is never going to be the perfect thing that you could possibly submit at the end of the assignment. If you're going in for your final paper and you're just going to start writing that bad boy and you're going to turn in the very last, once you put the last period in the Microsoft Word document and you're going to submit that bad boy for a final paper, that is not good. Don't do that, please. Draft it out, create an outline, then draft out something. Draft out a couple paragraphs, draft out even one paragraph or two. One thing that I told my students recently, because we're actually having our very first rough draft due on Wednesday, tomorrow night, is that I was like, just create something, anything, 2 paragraphs, 1 paragraph, whatever you could bring, just bring it in. Because it is better to have something than to not have anything at all. It is better to have at least a couple words than to not have anything with it. The last thing I want for them is to feel like all the pressure is already on them. It is already on their shoulders for the very first draft. I don't want that at all. I want them to know that they could just write something out, that they could be free. The first draft is where you're going to make your mistakes, and that's where you're going to correct your mistakes. The first draft is where you're going to get an idea down, and then you may even have to either rephrase that idea or totally kill that idea. But the first draft will help you at least know where you want to start and where you want to go by the end of it. So draft, create a draft, please. Creating a draft and having an outline will help you avoid also my favorite thing in writing, usually from a freshman, which is typically when you're writing a paper, you're just kind of like throwing up information. You're just kind of like saying, blah, 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 Wikipedia, Google article that I found, all that stuff. And you're just kind of throwing everything that you possibly found for your research paper into the paper that you're turning in. We often call that just throwing up an essay when we're grading papers in the academic circle. It's not a very pretty sight. It's not a very pretty essay, but it kind of is what typically happens is we just want to spew out all our information that we have without a clear focus in mind. So we just throw out every single thing that you could think of, and it's not perfectly workshopped out. It's not edited afterwards. And then we turn that in, and then when I read it, as a professor and I'm grading that paper, I'm like, oh, they literally just got 10 resources for the research paper, threw it all into one paper, and then turned that bad boy in. And they called it a day without like actually clear focus in mind. And it's pretty funny at first. Of course, I don't give them a great grade, but it's pretty funny. But all of this stuff will help you make sure that you avoid that and that you find that clear focus. One thing that I'm really passionate about when I have students do research papers is that they are maintaining their own voice throughout it. If you think about it this way, when you are writing a research paper, say you're adding 10 sources to your research paper, I like to say that's like you're adding 10 voices to your paper that are not your own. Your paper is coming from you as a writer. It is your own voice. It should be. It's filling out something. You're answering a question. You're creating an outline where you're adding sources to your paper. You're adding different voices to either come alongside you or to balance you out with different antithetical opinions. And you're trying to all work cohesively together with the sources that you're using. You don't want your sources to always completely work against you. You don't want them to always completely work for you in academic writing. You want to use your sources for balance, but you don't want your sources to overpower what you're trying to say. You want to make sure that you're writing your essay in your own voice and you're including the sources in a way that backs up your own voice and thoughts and opinions. And a draft and an outline will help you know how to get those sources in the right format, in the right way, and where they should be. Sometimes I tell my students when they're drafting that I'm gonna look over their paper, I'm gonna ask them to either edit locally or edit globally. What I mean by that is I'm gonna ask them to either edit locally, which is like within the sentence, say there's like a small little typo in the sentence, you just gotta edit that out, clear a couple things here and there, that's totally okay. But sometimes I'll ask them to edit globally. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's okay if you have to literally shift one paragraph from page 4 to page 2. Or you got to shift from one point from the very end of the essay to the very beginning of the essay, because that's how it kind of flows a little bit better. That's how it sounds a little neater. And it's okay to do both. It's okay to edit big. It's okay to edit small. But you can't really edit big or edit small if you're turning in the final draft of your essay to begin with. If you're turning that in and that's the last and final thing that you're doing, you can't really do these edits like you need to. And writing is rewriting. That's key. To write is to rewrite. To write is continually draft, continually change, continually edit. I have my students do little 10-minute writings all the time, because I know if I get them writing for at least 10 minutes in the beginning, that we could kind of start getting a flow going on. And then we could also look back and see like, oh, I could actually change that up a little bit next time that I write. And you start practicing what you're doing, because writing is rewriting. Writing is creating something, then creating something different, then creating something different, editing what you just created and going backwards. Writing is a task like that sometimes. And it's always about kind of rephrasing and always kind of redoing. So you want to edit, you want to draft, you want to create an outline, you want to make sure that when you're drafting that you're either editing locally or globally. And the best thing that I could always tell you guys is after you draft, please take a break. When I was writing my thesis, there was no earthly way that I could write literally just in my room all day, all the time, without losing my sanity, without just completely just going insane. Sometimes it is okay to take a break. It is okay to give yourself a moment to rest. It is okay to write something in one location and then resume in another. And sometimes, even when I was creating this outline, I would write down this outline for this workshop, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get a cup of coffee, because I need to just kind of give my brain a break. I need to kind of rest. I need to recharge. I need to go back, get refocused back in. Because if you're just literally writing in one headspace for an entire essay, you're kind of setting yourself for damage for a loss there too. I mean, you're literally only gonna sound like one thing. You're only gonna have one track focus. If you're writing your essay at 10 o'clock when it's due at midnight the same day, that's pretty rough. You don't want to do that. You're going to write in one very specific headspace, which is I'm writing super nervously and frantically, and I want to make sure that I pass. So you don't want to do that. You want to give yourself enough time when you're preparing an essay to draft, to outline, to have a break, to draft, to outline, to breathe, to draft, to breathe, to relax, to write again, to write, to relax, to breathe, to refocus. All of it, you want to make sure that it is both cohesive and you have enough time to kind of work it out all together, but that you're also not losing yourself kind of in the paper, that you're not getting completely stressed over this one thing, and that you're maintaining your sanity throughout the entire paper itself. Because that's important. We don't want to overwhelm our students in an essay. We want to make sure that they're being responsible and they're managing their time responsibly. So the best thing that I always tell my students is that if you're stuck, if you're facing writer's block, if you're really just completely lost on what to do next, get a coffee, take a break, take a nice walk around the place, do something that'll get you out of that headspace, and then you can resume, you can think on it, you can come back and just start drafting again or start writing again, and making sure that you're not a little worried about it being too perfect and too great off the bat. And the last thing that I want to share with you guys is make sure, before we go to questions, of course, academic writing, don't get this mistaken, academic writing is an argument. It is. Analyzing something is oftentimes an argument. Analyzing is not just a summary. Academic writing is not just a summary of something, it is saying something. I think we're afraid of often saying that we are arguing in an academic circle. But honestly, that is how you say something in the end. Academic writing is argumentation. It's not like the argumentation that you see in Twitter, where you're just kind of tweeting back and forth and kind of saying random things over to each other in a very hurtful manner sometimes. It is not the argumentation that you see in a lot of different cable news shows. It is respectful argumentation that is looking at a viewpoint and that you're either challenging or speaking your mind into. One thing that I always really try to encourage my students is that you have, like I said before, this one finite opportunity to say something to a conversation that's been happening before you. We want you to argue. We want you to disagree. We don't want you to be afraid of not agreeing with us. I even tell my students, don't be afraid of disagreeing with me. That's okay. I am a English professor helping teach essays. If you don't agree with the method that I choose or a source that I bring in, I want to know. And that way we can look at that together. To grow, to learn, in education means that you will oftentimes have to argue and either be wrong or be right, and you will grow together with classmates or faculty afterwards. But academic writing is an argument. We want you to say something. We don't want you to just regurgitate information. We don't want you to go off through a Wikipedia page or a Google page. We want you to actively speak to a situation. And education is best time in your life because you get that chance to do so. You get that chance to be wrong. You get that chance to be right. You get that chance to just try it out and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, that's totally okay because it was the first draft or it was one essay and you get to rework that if you need to. But we want you to really say something and speak into something. And we don't want you to lose that when you're overly concerned about, am I being too formal versus informal? Am I not starting off authentic? Am I sounding too overly authentic? And do I need to scale it back? Do I need to put the right verbiage on? We want to make sure that you're saying something by not being overly concerned with the topic and that you're looking at a specific question. You're looking at the question that you actually want to look at, that you're passionate about, that you actually want to find an answer to. And even if you may not find an answer, that is totally okay. Because in the end, that's just what education is. There are no answers sometimes, and we got to be okay with that. I know it burns sometimes some of us in our soul that there may not be a clear answer, but there oftentimes isn't. Once you start figuring out that question, you got to create that outline. You got to draft. You got to make sure that you create that first draft. And again, if you don't know the end, that's 100% okay. It's about making sure that you get the draft, that you get to know how you're going to speak, so you don't just sound like a crazy person in an essay, and you get to draft and you get to edit that, and you get to see how you can improve as a writer, because writing is always improving. Writing is rewriting. To improve is always improve. It is always the process of growing. And we want you to say something, all of this to say that this is going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge. But you guys are here for a challenge. You guys are here for this task. You guys are here because these shows that you want to step into something, and that you weren't afraid to even do that just by the application process to where you are now, to all the classes that you guys are taking. You guys were not afraid of a challenge, and that is why you're here. So don't be afraid of the challenge of writing. Don't let this workshop or anything after that discourage you from writing. Let it hopefully step you into your class and your next assignment that you're going to have. And hopefully you just feel like, you know what, it is going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge. Maybe I've been setting myself for a loss, but I can now do a couple of different things differently to make sure that my essays are better. But ultimately, all that matters is that you guys are saying something that you're passionate about, that you're speaking into a conversation, and that you get to leave this school and education knowing that you actually contributed something worth knowing and worth valuing into the conversation that's already happening around you. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions about anything about formatting, essay writing, anything in general? I'd love to try to answer anything I can.
I actually have a question, Professor Mark.
Yes.
So when you go to, I don't know if I can word this right, trying to get my thoughts together. When you go to write a research paper,
Yes.
how would you, so I assume we start it in third person, correct? How would you bring your idea? Could you give an example sentence of how you could bring an idea, like how you would start it?
Yeah, so one thing that I kind of do with my class that I think kind of just works for any research paper that you tend to write So in my class, we do a theory paper, and then we turn that theory from their paper into their research paper. Because they're already starting off with an idea, and they're already starting off in the theory paper in a kind of like less formal way. I tell them that that one is kind of more of like an argumentative essay or persuasive essay than it is a research paper. So they could be a little bit, more informal than your typical research paper. But then when we get to the research paper, then we kind of scale back all kind of like the informal opinions and start turning into a formal research essay in itself. So I know typically with research papers, like if you're going straight into a research paper, you already got to start thinking of how to do the formal process of it. But it's always best to kind of get down that specific question that you're trying to answer before you kind of first go into it. And if you're kind of just drafting and if you're kind of just trying to figure it out in the beginning, the stuff that you work to get that research paper where it needs to be, it can be in any kind of which format that you want to. So if you're trying to figure out that question, go at it in a way that you personally know how your voice sounds. I guess another thing I didn't mention is like really know your voice as a writer and as a speaker. Really know how you best write or how you best speak, and how you best interpret and how you best understand. And once you get that interpretation down in a way that that feels authentic to yourself, then you can start kind of working in the formal language and the sources, and make sure that they kind of help balance you out instead of kind of taking you out of it in a lot of ways. Research papers definitely are hard. It's definitely kind of hard to go right into that formal academic writing if you have like no paper and then a research paper. That definitely is kind of like a pretty big challenge. But yeah, definitely I would say just really know the question that you're looking at, or really know kind of like the overall kind of topic you're looking at. Like if you're looking at like the Roman Church in the 16th century, or kind of like the Catholic Church in the 15th century, that's a very broad topic in itself. What are you actually trying to like answer in that research paper? And that way also, once you get that question in a research paper, you don't have to just type in like into a website browser or into a library like the 15th century church, because that'll be like a million different articles. You want to make sure that once you kind of know the focus that you're doing, that even the research paper kind of sources that you bring in will start getting a little more narrow and focused too, and a little bit more relevant to the paper that you're trying to write overall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
Not sure how to phrase this. So I'm writing a research paper too, and I think it's for the same class. Well,
Oh no.
it's for the same class that she was just in. And I decided to write about a person, and I was thinking of writing about how he had a significant effect on Pentecostalism, but I was wondering, does that, if I was talking about that and giving all this information, would it make the research paper have kind of this air of persuasiveness in that I was giving the information to persuade people of how significant his contributions were, or how significant he was in affecting Pentecostalism?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, actually. I would say it could get a little persuasive. One thing that I was actually worried about when just kind of hearing that too was, is it going to sound like a little like too autobiographical in some ways?
Right.
So I think when you're kind of like writing a research paper over a person and like their effects on Pentecostalism, you definitely want to make sure that it's not sounding like too over autobiographical,
Right.
that it is sounding like you're trying to answer like, why was this person comparatively more like, impactful to Pentecostalism than, his contemporaries around him in a specific way? Or why was that great for that specific era that he served in and that he worked in? And how did he kind of work within that era in itself? So yeah, I would say it could sound maybe a little over too persuasive, but also research papers are kind of generally persuasive in itself. Yeah, they're more like formal. Of course, they're more formal to begin with. Research papers are still generally pretty persuasive. It's just adding research to now prove your point in a more formal way, but you're still kind of ultimately persuading that reader that what you're saying is correct and valid. So it is generally persuasive in itself. I'll be more worried about making sure that you're not just kind of doing an autobiography.
Right.
the person.
points that I had for mine was talking about his theology, the effect, and the present, like how, like, today's.
Yeah, no, that's perfect then. Yeah, yeah, definitely working through the multiple layers. And that's one thing that I help my students with all the time is that they'll come to me with a research paper, and then I'll kind of just help them like skew it to make sure that they find just some sort of kind of like answer or destination that they're trying to go into by the very end of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for the questions. We are out of time, unfortunately, but I would say if you have questions, we are happy to help you out at the SSC. But also, Mark, can you answer this one last question? Do you think if people have issues,
Yes.
they can ask their professors?
Yes, ask your professor. Don't be afraid of communicating with anything at all. I love when actually like students communicate me and they're like, I actually have no idea what I'm about to write or what I'm about to do. And that's okay because we could help steer them to where we want them to go. I never like telling my students what I want them to write. I just want to help them feel comforted in knowing that I'm just going to enjoy what they are able to produce and what they're able to do. So email your professor, ask for any details that they could help with. They may not give you a good, straightforward answer, but that's because they don't want you to find a straightforward essay to that answer. They want to see what you're able to contribute with that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody who has participated. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.